4 p.m. We have a lot of ground to cover today. Let me just give you an outline of what to expect in this first hour together. Today, Chicago lawyer Adam Beckerink appeared in a Cook County courtroom to be formally charged with murdering his estranged wife, 36-year-old Caitlin Tracey, in October of 2024. I think it is okay to say at this point in time that the case has been quite long, sad, and a bit of a twisted journey here. So Casey Cronus has been on the story from the very beginning, and we're going to be getting an update from her about what happened and where things go from here. Also, we know how much many of you who watch on a regular basis love Harvard astronomer, the one and only Avi Loeb, and he says that he has a doozy for us today. He just released 2 new papers on 3I Atlas that we'll be discussing. That will be around 1:15, but there's plenty of live events happening today. I'm going to start you off going to Washington, D.C., where protests are starting to happen outside of the Supreme Court. You can see all those folks out there, some flags that they're flying in the sky. We see protesters on really both sides of the issue of transgender athletes in sports. So what I'm seeing here is that there is reason to believe the Supreme Court is likely to rule in favor of the states that ban transgender athletes in school sports. They have been going through arguments over the last 3 hours now into cases that come out of 2 states who are looking at restrictions on which teams transgender students can actually join. So decisions are not expected until early summer, but again, it does look likely that it's headed in that direction right now, and you can already see people gathered here outside of the Supreme Court in anticipation of a little bit more information. Let's also now take you to Detroit. The president is speaking at the Detroit Economic Club, and we're going to listen into a bit of his address.
Well, we think it looks better. He said, look, red is Republican. Let's not try and change the voters' minds on things. Just do it that way. And the map was virtually all right. That was about the counties. That was the 2,700 to 550, I think is the exact number. Most importantly, we won a historic mandate to make America great again. And that's what we're doing. We're making America great again like never before. And now, after less than 12 months in office, this is the easiest speech to make. I have great people, and all I'm doing is spewing off what the hell we've done. Even Venezuela wasn't too bad, was it, huh? But you have people, Democrats, they say, I don't know if we should have done Venezuela, I don't know. Anybody that says that hates our country, okay? That was as flawless an attack as there has ever been. And they asked us to help them. They have 50 million barrels of oil. They said, take it. It's $5 billion. And we did. We're working with the Venezuelan people and representatives, and it's amazing. But that was an amazing situation. But we did al-Baghdadi, flawless. We did Soleimani, flawless. We did the Iran nuclear attack where we wiped out their nuclear capacity, which would have been very bad. You wouldn't have peace in the Middle East, flawless. We did them all flawless. I want to keep it going that way, too. I like flawless. Think about Jimmy Carter, the great Jimmy Carter, with the helicopters crashing, the hostages all over the place. Remember that one? Think about Sleepy Joe Biden with Afghanistan. What a disaster. The most embarrassing day in the history of our country, in my opinion. Real dope. Now, after less than 12 months in office, I'm back in Michigan to report to you on the strongest and fastest economic turnaround in our country's history. It's really been historic. There's never been, we're not 12 months, we're through 11 months. We've got $18 trillion being invested in our country. The most of any country ever was 3. We're at 18. There's never been anything like this. You are so lucky I allow you into this room to even be with me. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. The fake news will say Donald Trump thinks he's hot stuff. Right now I'm feeling pretty good, though, I will say. Oh, you're so lucky to be here. Under our administration, growth is exploding, productivity is soaring, investment is booming, incomes are rising, inflation is defeated, America is respected again like never before, and other than that, we're not doing that well. Now think of all those things I just said. Every single inflation down, growth at an all-time high, Stock market, every day, 48 days in a row, 48 days during the course of 11 months, we hit a new high on the stock market, all of them. 1 year ago, we were a dead country. Now we are the hottest country anywhere in the world. That was said to me by many leaders. By almost every metric, we have quickly gone from the worst numbers on record to the best and strongest numbers, the most dynamic numbers, and an economy that is far ahead of even my optimistic. I had a very optimistic schedule, I thought. I didn't think it was, but people said it was very optimistic. Turns out to be very pessimistic by compared to what we've done. But we'll go down as the greatest in history, greatest first year in history nobody's ever had, just based on the numbers, based only on the numbers, not based on me, based only on the numbers, because, you know, you get these guys like the governor of California likes to say how well he's doing. California's doing horrendously, but he says how well. We base it on numbers. There's never been numbers like this. Through 4 long years before I took office, crooked Joe Biden and his allies in Congress inflicted the economic nightmare known as stagflation. How many times have you heard the word? We hit it with Joe. We hit everything. What a disaster. Meaning low growth and high inflation. How does that work? Not good. So you have lousy growth and high inflation. In fact, it's the lowest growth ever and the worst inflation in the history of our country. That is really tantamount to not having a good 4 years, right? In other words, Sleepy Joe and the people that ran the auto pen were a complete and total disaster for our nation. They were a disaster for our nation. Had they won the election less than 1 year ago, we would have been, as I've often said, Venezuela on steroids. Now I'm Venezuela's biggest fan. We're working with them, but they came down from a very high number to a disaster, a disaster. And we would have been Venezuela on steroids, and we're bringing Venezuela back, and we're going to be great for Venezuela, great for our country. We're taking in, as I said, millions and millions of barrels of oil, and now they're coming in initially on a daily basis, 50 million, and values of over $5 billion. That's in 1 day. Just think of it, the biggest ships in the world can take 1 million barrels. The biggest ships in the world take 1 million. We have 50 million barrels. We need 50 of the biggest ships in the world just to get it out. We're bringing it in to be refined. It's an incredible feeling. It's great. Winning is a good thing. We're going to work with Venezuela. We'll make that country very strong again. We'll get oil prices down even further. We have it down at about a 6-year low, 7-year low, but we're going to get it down further. Joe Biden gave us a colossal stagflation catastrophe, but my administration's rapidly and very decisively ended that. We have quickly achieved the exact opposite of stagflation, almost no inflation and super high growth. So we have the highest growth we've ever had. Think of that. The highest growth we've ever had, and we've only been there 11 months. Think of what we can do for the rest of it. But do we have wood around here? I want to knock on a little wood. They have one little, everything's plastic nowadays. It's very tough. Now we have the greatest growth, and we have, inflation way, way down. But we inherited terrible growth, and we inherited the worst inflation in the history of our country. The fake news would say 49 years. So when I say the history, they give me a lot of time, but I believe it's the history. But let's say 49 years. Would you say 49 years is okay, right? It's pretty bad. What do you think, Mr. Senator, Mr. Future Senator? I'd say 49. What sounds worse, 49 years or history? I think 49 years almost sounds worse. Maybe I'll just use it and I won't argue with these people. As of this morning, core inflation for the past 3 months has been just 1.6%. The numbers we just announced just before I came on stage. And GDP is smashing expectations with the fastest growth for this country in many years. The fourth quarter is projected at 5.4%, and that's despite the Democrat shutdown where we lost at least 1.5 points. The Democrat shutdown, we would have had close to 7. Think of that, close to 7. They were projecting to, the fakers were projecting to. And if we keep deregulating and adding more capacity, like I saw today at Ford, and if we don't raise interest rates every time good news is mentioned. In the old days, I'm probably old. I used to be up at these lecterns and I'd say, I'm younger than pretty much everybody in the room. Now I say I'm older than pretty much everybody in the room. I like it the other way better, actually. But you're too young. But in the old days, when you had good numbers, interest rates would go down. When you had good numbers, the market would go through the roof. That's the way we're going to make it again. That's the old-fashioned way. That's the right way. Today, if you announce great numbers, they raise interest rates to try and kill it. So you can never really have the kind of rally you should have. What happens and what we want, we're going to have a lot of great months, a lot of great quarters. I want the market to go up. You announce unbelievable numbers and the market goes down because they know you're going to do everything possible. In the Fed, we have a real stiff in the Fed, but that's for another day. But they raise rates. So everyone says, oh, they announced great numbers. It's great, great, great. And the market goes down because they immediately raise rates. No. When the market goes up, they should lower rates. You want to see 20% and 25%? You want to see what we can do? We've got to go back to an old standard. When there's good news, the market should go up, not go down. Does that make sense to everybody? And that's the way it used to be for most of the time. That's the way you make it.
Okay, so again, we have been listening into President Trump as he's been making remarks there at the Detroit Economic Club. He says there's almost no inflation. He talked about incomes rising. He says that America is respected like never before and that we're the hottest country anywhere in the world. He also made reference to a couple of things that I'm going to expound on just briefly here. He talked about the fact that the Consumer Price Index report just came out a few hours ago before he got on stage. Of course, he has had a busy day. Earlier, he was visiting the Ford plant to promote manufacturing. But yes, that report did come out. It shows core U.S. consumer prices rose less than predicted in December. This apparently is reinforcing the hopes that inflation is tempering as the Federal Reserve contemplates its next move on interest rates. Of course, there is a lot to that sentence there because, of course, the DOJ has now issued subpoenas for the Federal Reserve's office there, and we're seeing this back and forth now between the DOJ, President Trump, and the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell. So we'll see what happens there, whether that influences where the interest rates go in the next few months, whether we get another percentage cut, we shall see. But the numbers did come out, and again, it does show some predictions that reinforce the hope that inflation is tempered just a bit here. He also talked about that issue between what's going on at the Federal Reserve. So there's a lot going on there, and we'll just talk a little bit more about it as the days, weeks, and months press on with that situation. It is 1:13 right now, though. I did promise you that right around 1:15 we were bringing in the one and only Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb. Get your questions ready. Go ahead. Start putting him in the chat so we can add him into our discussion here. But he's already said he's coming to the show today with plenty to talk about. So let's take a quick break, 2 minutes, and we'll be right back. Okay, it's 1:15 right now, and for the last several months, we have been talking and trying to get more information about this rare interstellar comet we've now come to know as 3I Atlas. And we've pulled in Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb many times, but today he's released 2 new papers about 3I Atlas, and he's joining us now to talk more about what he found, what's new. Thanks for your time once again.
It's a great pleasure to join you.
All right. What's in the new papers?
Yeah, so the most exciting development is that in about a week, on January 22nd, the Earth will be between 3I Atlas and the Sun. And that is to a precision of 0.69 degrees. A very precise alignment that we are very fortunate to have. It's sort of like having a guest and then realizing how fortunate you are in terms of the circumstances. Now, what would that allow us? Because we would be just between the sun and this object, we will see the reflection of sunlight from the object and from any dust or gas around it from the direction of the sun. And that means that we should expect a brightening of the object on the 22nd of January, because usually when you look at dust from the direction of the sun, you can get an enhancement in the reflected light. Because first of all, if you imagine a particle being illuminated by light, when you look at it from the direction of the sun, you're seeing it in full. You're seeing the full face of it, just like when we see a full moon. But in addition to that, there is a quantum mechanical effect that enhances backscattered light. In other words, the light that is impinging on any particle is reflected with constructive interference. So you end up getting a larger signal, larger brightness, because you're looking at it exactly from the direction of the sun. And therefore, we can learn about the nature of the material that is being shed by 3I Atlas much better than before. We could infer the characteristic structure of the dust particles coming from it, whether they are small or big. And by the way, in order for them to reach such great distances at which we see them in the anti-tail, there is this jet pointed towards the sun. They must have a large size, at least 100 times more than we are used to in terms of dust particles. They need to be pretty big, about 10 to 100 micrometers, just because big particles have less surface for their mass, so they cannot be pushed as easily by reflecting sunlight. And we don't see a tail behind this object away from the sun, presumably because the particles that are shed by the nucleus of this object 3I Atlas are big. And this observation on the 22nd of January will allow us to infer the nature of the particles that are being shed. And moreover, there is a very unusual, anomalous polarization of the light that was detected from 3I Atlas several months ago. So we should be able to learn much more about the nature, the origin of this unusual polarization. So all in all, we will be able to figure out some of the anomalies of 3I Atlas on the 22nd of January. And we should not take it for granted, because it may be decades before we have another object that is aligned so perfectly with the Earth-Sun axis. That's one paper from today. But then the second one I should mention is based on data from the Hubble Space Telescope that was taken. There were a large number, 17 images taken between November 30th and December 27th by the Hubble Space Telescope, and they were shared publicly, and we were able to analyze them and notice that the jet coming from the object, that there are 2 jets. There is a prominent one towards the sun and a smaller one away from the sun, and this jet structure seems to wobble over 7.2 hours. Basically wobbles around the rotation axis of the object, just like the light beam from when you look at the lighthouse, as it rotates, as it spins, the light beam is moving along a cone. And in the same way, the jets that are presumably launched from near the pole of the rotation axis, are wobbling in the sky. And we can measure the rotation period of about 7.2 or 7.1 hours. And we also measure the same rotation period from the brightness variations of the object. So when the jets are moving around, the brightness of the object changes. And we notice exactly the same period. So this is a second paper where the brightness we monitored from a telescope on Earth. So the Hubble Space Telescope data and ground-based data seem to agree on the rotation period after perihelion, after the object passed near the sun. This is the first report on the rotation of 3I Atlas.
I'm looking over a couple of your reports, at least one of the reports that immediately comes up about this topic online from your papers that you published today. Explain a little bit more of this concept of the opposition surge.
Right. So that's when the object appears exactly opposite to the sun relative to us. We are the observer, and we look at the object, and it happens to be exactly on the opposite side from where the sun is, which is very good for observations, by the way, because the sun is not visible at night, and you just look at night in the direction of the object, you see the reflection of sunlight from it. And because of that, there should be a surge in the brightness of the object. As I explained before, it's just like a full moon situation, also amplified by some quantum mechanical effect of backscatter of the sunlight. So altogether, it's a great opportunity that was not recognized. And the reason I wrote this paper was to encourage observers to use that opportunity and use the best telescopes we have to measure the properties of the dust and gas around the object that scatters sunlight. And I wrote it with a collaborator named Mauro Barbieri from Italy.
And another thing that you have in here, an unprecedented polarization properties. Explain that a little bit more.
So light is polarized, as we know. For example, when during a sunny day, you often see reflection from an asphalt road because what happens, that reflected light is getting polarized. And when you wear sunglasses, very often you block some polarization of sunlight. Light can be polarized, meaning the electric and magnetic field of the light can move differently around as the light propagates. For example, circular polarization is when the electric or magnetic field are rotating clockwise or counterclockwise as the wave propagates. And you can have two modes of polarization. If you combine circular polarizations in opposite directions, you can get linear polarization. And so light can be polarized. And what was found about this object is that the polarization is negative and very extreme, unprecedented among comets. And I suspect that it's a result of this very prominent jet that is aimed towards the sun, because that is we have never seen such a thing, propagating to about 400,000 kilometers, which is comparable to the Earth-Moon separation. So just imagine a jet coming from Earth, going all the way to the Moon, 10 times longer than it is wide. That's what happens near 3I Atlas.
Any idea as to why we're seeing these unprecedented or, these things we haven't seen before?
Well, that's the puzzle. That's what makes science fun. And I wrote 3 papers already on this anti-tail jet, trying to explain it. And it's still unresolved. One possibility is that it's made of fragments of ice, and they do get evaporated by sunlight eventually, and they never turn around to become a cometary tail. Another possibility is that we're dealing with large dust particles or objects ejected by 3I Atlas, and they don't suffer much slowdown as they go against the solar wind and against the solar radiation. So we don't know the actual explanation. It would be very informative to get new data on January 22nd, and my hope is that observers will listen to me and look at this object then.
Okay, so when do people need to be out on January 22nd? Give us our marching orders for January 22nd.
Well, we need the large telescopes to get high precision data. We need the telescopes that are bigger than 1 meter, roughly half the height of a person. And only those bigger telescopes could get us high quality data that would inform us about these jets. But amateur astronomer telescopes that are a factor of a few smaller are also very useful because we can see the anti-tail. We've seen it for a couple of months when no data from large telescopes was available. So I very much value the information that the amateur astronomers collect, and it definitely was featured in my essays.
Give me your thoughts on NASA's Artemis 2, this moon mission for 2026.
Yeah, so that's exciting. The astronauts will, for the first time, since the Apollo program, we will have humans coming close to the moon, except they will not land on it in the first mission, Artemis 2. They will just circle around the moon and come back, and that's a good first step. And my hope is that by 2030, indeed, as NASA aims to do, we will land humans on the moon, but not only for the sake of demonstrating we can do it, but more importantly, to establish some sustainable base there. And that is important for national security, for national pride, but also for scientific applications. The moon is very beneficial for astronomical observatories, for example. It has no atmosphere, so there is no turbulence in the atmosphere that sort of causes scintillation or fuzziness of sources of light in the universe. And there is no light pollution as of yet from cities on the moon. So it's a wonderful environment to put telescopes. But in addition, the moon doesn't have any seismic activity. So, for example, a decade ago, I wrote a paper arguing that we should put probably a gravitational wave detector on the moon, like LIGO that we have in the US right now. And the advantage of the moon is because there is no seismic noise, that one can go to, in principle, lower frequencies of gravitational waves and detect black holes all the way to the edge of the universe. So the moon offers great advantages for astronomical observatories as long as the cities that we build there will not be too populated.
What are the first things you're hoping to gain from their trips?
Just demonstrating we can do it and bringing people back to the moon. That would be extremely valuable. You know, the moon is a museum that we haven't really explored because over the past 4.6 billion years or so, it was able to collect materials on its surface without burning them in the atmosphere. The Earth burns objects that are smaller than about a meter as they collide with the atmosphere and as a result of the friction with air. And the moon just collects them on the surface. And so there should be a treasure of impacts over there that could inform us about the history of the solar system, including technological artifacts from other civilizations that by chance collided on the surface of the moon. We just are not aware of them because we haven't explored that museum as of yet. And they could be covered with dust, but we could potentially survey the surface of the moon and find more about it. You know, it's a fascinating environment. The same is true about Mars. It's also a museum. It has a very thin layer, atmospheric layer. It lost its atmosphere 2.5 billion years ago. So for half of its history, it was without an atmosphere. And we know that Mars had liquid water on the surface. That adds another interesting part to the scientific study of it. We want to figure out if it had life even before Earth had it.
Let me ask you this. You kind of casually mentioned other civilizations that may have been out there. Do you think that when we do send these astronauts to the moon, that we'll actually get all of the information they collect?
Well, if they engage in the search, you know, it's just like people who are lonely. They often complain about the fact that they don't have a partner. They often say, what Enrico Fermi said in 1950, where is everybody? And just last week, we heard a report from the SETI community, from the Breakthrough Listen project, that was searching for radio signals from 3I Atlas, the interstellar object we talked about. And they just searched for 5 hours. And, this object spent 8,000 years in the solar system from the edge of the Oort cloud until it got close to the sun, 8,000 years. And just thinking that if you survey it for 5 hours, you will learn whether it's technological or not, it's very presumptuous, and it's not clear that there would be a transmission in our direction. It may be beamed in a completely different direction. It may not be in the frequency range that we search for, but it may not be in the time window that we search for. And moreover, an interstellar traveler will not correspond with its senders, because there is no benefit to that. It takes 30,000 years for light to cross the Milky Way galaxy to get to another star far away. And so there is no point in exchanging information in real time. And what would make sense is, after completing the journey through the solar system, to relay all the relevant information in a burst of radio waves, maybe, but not every 5 hours, the way that these SETI people imagined. It's just like sending a kid out of home. You don't expect the kid to be in constant contact with you. The kid has its own brain and makes decisions on their own, and they send a post or a tweet every now and then, or some a message. But imagining that we can rule out the technological origin just based on our most primitive technologies that we invented back 100 years ago is really inappropriate. We should be more humble. I do believe that it's very likely that we have neighbors. And of course, it doesn't really matter whether we appreciate that or not, whether we dismiss that, whether we search for that. It's completely irrelevant. They are either out there or not. And it's very likely that they are out there, because there are 100 billion stars. 10% of them have a planet the size of the Earth, and roughly at the same separation from a sun-like star. And most of the sun-like stars formed billions of years before the sun. So there was plenty of time for them to be much more advanced than we are and to reach our backyard. And the most important reason for us to search for them proactively is because it can help us be better. Because those successful civilizations that managed to reach us are far more accomplished, and they would serve as a role model for us. So it's for our benefit to be agnostic and not dismiss the idea, not to argue that we must be the smartest and not search for anything else, because that would resemble, as I mentioned at the beginning, a person who wants to date, to find a partner, but then argues, oh, there is nobody good enough for me. and when you go on dates, you better aim high. That's my recommendation, not aim low. What the astronomy community is doing right now is aiming low, because it's searching for microbes. The astronomy community wants to invest more than $10 billion in the next 2 decades to search for microbes. And I say, in the search for a partner, we better aim high. We better look for an intelligent species out there, because we can learn from it. Just imagine sitting on a dinner table when the partner is a microbe. I mean, okay, well, it's good to know that you're out there, but I cannot learn much from you.
Professor Loeb. Oh my goodness. Astronomy and dating advice. We didn't know there was a correlation here, but you're drawing the connection. We're following where you're going with this. And since we're talking about dating, sometimes you look far out and you think they've got to be way maybe out there somewhere, and maybe the person is right under your nose. Do you think that we're missing something that's a little closer in from the moon and Mars?
Yeah, it's quite possible, because we've been searching for 65 years for radio signals out of planets very far away, but maybe there's something next to us that is using much more advanced technologies that we cannot really figure out. For us, it looks like it's not out there, but it's just because we are still in the Stone Age. And just imagine a cave dweller finding a cell phone. they would argue that it's a rock of a type that they've never seen before, but they would still insist that it's a rock because it's shiny and it's solid. And we might be treating objects that are potentially much more advanced than we can imagine as if they are natural. That's quite possible. And the communication may not be with radio waves. It may be with some other devices that we've never imagined because our imagination is limited by our experience. I always recommend not relying on Hollywood script writers when you imagine extraterrestrial intelligence. And you know, we know about the unknown, some unknowns. For example, most of the matter in the universe, we call it dark matter. Most of the energy is dark energy. We don't know if there are entities just like us out there. So these are the known unknowns. But the most exciting discoveries will come from the unknown unknowns. And it could well be that we are surrounded by things that we don't recognize, you know, but just because we have a very limited imagination experience that is based on the training data set that we have. You know, we are just like AI systems. We are limited by our training data set. And if we were not trained on something beyond our own technologies, we might not recognize it.
Very interesting stuff here. Okay, so you've given us our homework for January 22nd. Since we are in January, are there some other notable dates or time frames that you're looking at for 2026?
Yes, March 16th. That's when 3 Atlas will come closest to Jupiter, within exactly the distance where Jupiter's gravity dominates over the Sun's gravity. And it could well be a coincidence. Once again, this object seems to have a lot of coincidences. It lies within 5 degrees in the ecliptic plane of the planets around the Sun. It also appears to be to come very close to Mars and Jupiter, and it has a rotation axis which is aligned with the direction of the Sun at large distances to within 10 to 20 degrees. All of these are geometric coincidences that we cannot explain. People would argue it's just a matter of chance, but each of them has a percent level chance, and when you put them together, it's very unlikely. But anyway, so there will be this approach to Jupiter at exactly this hill radius where Jupiter's gravity dominates, and one possibility is that it's planned and that the object will deploy some devices that will become satellites of Jupiter. And we can obviously monitor what happens near Jupiter. We have the Juno spacecraft there, and we have 2 other spacecraft on their way to Jupiter. One is JUICE, and the other one is the Europa Clipper. Both were launched by the European Space Agency. So altogether, we'll keep monitoring Jupiter in the years to come. And if we see satellites that were not there a while ago, that appeared suddenly after the passage of 3I Atlas, then of course it would raise the suspicion that it might be technological, because there is no reason for it to release or deploy fragments that will become gravitational bound to Jupiter if it's natural. In order for a daughter object to be released and stay bound to Jupiter, it needs to lose the velocity of 3I Atlas away from the Sun and have just the right amount of slowdown to become bound to Jupiter. So that is nearly impossible for a natural object to do. And if we see anything new there, we will know that we were dealing with something like a Trojan horse, something that we thought is natural, but maybe not. And of course, that was the original alert that I brought about the technological origin, potential technological origin of 3 Atlas, like a black swan event. And by the way, there was an interesting reply from the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, to a FOIA request for any records related to 3I Atlas. And the reply was not, we don't have any such records. It was, we cannot confirm nor deny the existence of such records. And that is interesting, because there must have been some discussions there. And the question is why? And I suspect it's because they wanted to be sure that it's not a black swan event. Now the intelligence agencies are quite alert to low probability events that have large impact on society. So they probably analyzed the data, wanted to figure out what 3I Atlas is for themselves, and they don't want to disclose it to the public in order not to create any panic as long as they are sure that it's not a risk to the safety of humanity, so to speak, they just put it under wraps and do not release the records. But it's interesting that they did not deny the existence of these records.
Yeah, usually when someone says, I will neither confirm nor deny, that's like, just mind your business. Okay, so we know that January 22nd is our time frame for this month. You told us March 16th will be another time frame. We'll be calling you back about that. You've given me a renewed interest in this conversation to go read Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, ironically enough. So maybe we'll have to call you back around Valentine's as well.
Well, there is much more in common among men and women than between us and extraterrestrials. That's my argument. So, it's a good, sandbox to engage in dating, just to figure out how much more extreme it would be for us to encounter extraterrestrials. Just because they don't necessarily share our biology, they don't share our language, they don't share our understanding of the universe. In fact, they may have a much better understanding. So there would be a lot of obstacles for us to sort of get into an emotional connection with them. But it would be a thrilling experience. And frankly, if I was offered a one-way trip on a spacecraft that would land on the front lawn of my home, I would take it.
That's a good way to end the conversation right there. Thank you so much, Professor Loeb. We always love having you here. We never know where the discussion will go, but one thing is for sure, it is always interesting.
Thank you for having me. It's a great
Take care. We'll talk to you again soon. Oh boy. I mean, we really never know where things are going to go when we talk to him, but he does. I mean, he's done so much research into all of this, and he really opens up your mind to things that maybe you have not considered before. Listen, it's about 1:43 right now. Coming up shortly, we're going to be talking with our own Casey Cronus, as she has been following this story that's gone from the South Loop here in Chicago to Michigan and back to Cook County again. She's been in court today. We're going to get a wrap up from her coming up after this break. So let's take 2 minutes and then we'll be right back. All right, it's 1:47 right now, and we're back with a story that has we've really covered for quite some time now. Prosecutors say that a man named Adam Beckerink from here in Chicago caused the death of his estranged wife, Tracey, by throwing her over a railing in the South Loop. But can they prove that? That's the question now. I want to go to our own Casey Cronus, who just got out of court. Casey, tell us what the hearing was for today and what happened.
Hey, Anita. So today was Adam Beckerink's initial appearance here at the Layton Criminal Courthouse in Cook County. He was extradited back to Illinois from Michigan yesterday when he was released from jail in Berrien County, Michigan, for separate domestic violence charges that he was serving time for there. He was arrested by Chicago police officers and U.S. Marshals. They brought him back to Illinois yesterday, and today he faced a judge for a first-degree murder charge in the death of 36-year-old Caitlin Tracey. As you mentioned, she was found dead at the bottom of a stairwell in their South Loop condo building now more than a year ago in October of 2024. So this case has been a long time coming, and for about 1 year, no suspects had been identified in this case. It wasn't until a few months ago that an arrest warrant was issued for Adam Beckerink. He served that time for the domestic violence charges in Michigan. He was released yesterday, but promptly arrested by local authorities.
Yeah, you know, a history of domestic violence doesn't prove that you, in fact, killed her. But I do want to talk a little bit more about that history. You interviewed her neighbors in Michigan, and it was such a gut-wrenching, gut-checking, honestly, story of the things that they had talked about her, the things they saw. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, a few months after she was found dead, we went to Berrien County, Michigan, where she owned a home in New Buffalo, and we talked to two of Caitlin Tracey's next-door neighbors, and they shared some really harrowing details with us about incidents that had occurred in Michigan at the home. Police were called to the home, incidents of domestic abuse. At one point, the neighbors recounted that Tracey shared with them that Adam Beckerink had allegedly strangled her, and she called 911, but he ended the phone call. 911 operators tried calling back. Police ended up responding to the home, and that is where, you know, a lot of these charges stem from, that he was facing time for and served time for now in Michigan. But those neighbors share that, you know, Caitlin Tracey, she was such a bubbly young woman, but they noticed a change in her when she began dating and then soon after married Beckerink. Now, in court today, the hearing was actually extended or continued until Friday. Adam's defense attorney said they need more time to review hundreds of pages of documents filed by prosecutors. That includes some witness transcriptions and some other police reports. So the hearing has been continued until Friday. That's when this will be revisited. Beckerink will be held in jail here in Cook County until at least Friday, and at 11:30 a.m. we will hear from his attorney on Friday, who will have his argument, his initial in the case, and then he will also offer an opinion on whether he feels cameras should or shouldn't be allowed in the courtroom. Our station, a couple other stations, have requested cameras be allowed in the courtroom for the trial. Prosecutors don't object to it, but Beckerink's defense attorney said he needs to think about that and formulate an opinion. He'll offer that to the judge this Friday.
And are we, and I don't know if you know this at this point, when they say witnesses, is it witnesses of prior domestic violence? Or do we know, like, what was the catalyst for them to actually bring murder charges against him as opposed to just the domestic violence charges from the past?
You know, all of those details will hopefully be details that we will soon learn in court, but investigators have kept the details and the evidence in this case very close to the vest. Again, we went over a year, or about a year to the date, that no one had been pinpointed as the suspect in this case. And then on the 1-year mark of her death, or her body's discovery rather, Adam Beckerink was identified as that suspect. So we don't know who exactly those witnesses are. Perhaps they are the neighbors in Michigan. Perhaps they are neighbors in the South Loop condo building where the couple most recently lived. Those are all details that we hope to hear more of this Friday.
And are we getting any indication that Tracey's family may be there?
So Tracey's family has been at every single hearing, including today, her parents and some other family members and supporters. They did not speak on camera today, and they likely will be called in this trial as they begin to call witnesses in the case. So they were not, they did not offer comment today, but their family spokesperson did, who shared that this is one step closer to justice for the family.
Yeah, just as we're talking, we just got in a statement from the family here, saying our family is deeply thankful to the Cook County State's Attorney Eileen O'Neill Burke and her team, as well as the Chicago Police Department's Violent Crimes Division. The CPD has worked long and hard to investigate this case. Although the defendant's criminal convictions and sentence in Michigan bring some measure of justice for Caitlin, this man must now be held accountable for his actions in the days and months that led to this moment. The state's charge that he murdered our beautiful daughter. We hope that justice will prevail and we can finally lay our dear Caitlin to rest. You know, that actually makes me think back to the beginning of this case. Casey, I remember he actually tried to prevent the family from having her body to bury her.
Yeah, that's right. He was arguing that he should be in custody of her remains and have the right to bury her because they were married. The family argued against that and fought that legally and won the rights to prevent him from knowing where she is buried and from having her remains.
Oh, man. I said, you know, from the beginning, this case has been long and it's just quite honestly twisted and very sad for the family, what they have gone through in this entire situation. Thank you so much for continuing to follow up on it. It seems like we'll probably need to have another conversation on Friday about how things go there and maybe whether some new information comes about on Friday. Like you said, we've only gotten information in little pieces, little pockets, in part because of your great reporting actually going to Michigan.
Thank you, Anita. And you know, you mentioned it's been a long time coming to get to this point. It's going to be a long trial, and it will take months, perhaps even longer, until we actually reach the point of trial. So this is a story we will, of course, continue to stay close, to keep a close eye on.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. We'll see you this afternoon as you put together your report for the day. It's 1:55, and you know we were just speaking a few days ago. Maybe this was sometime last week with Commissioner, one of the commissioners in the area who just put together a task force for violence against women, to fight against violence against women. And this was one of the cases that immediately came to mind. If you were with us in that conversation, you know, I asked her about were there some cases that came to mind for her, quite honestly. And I mentioned there was one from 2024. This is what I was talking about. I mean, it just really stays with you in terms of a domestic violence case that it just really has a lot of angles to it that I hope other people are taking some notes from. And we always just like to say, if you are in a situation where you need help, please reach out to get the help. Please, there are resources out there. Like I said, there is a new task force that's just been formed here in Cook County to help women, to help children who are caught in these situations. Never feel like you're alone. There are resources out there that could help you, and it could literally be the difference between life and death. We are going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're a little ahead of our next interview here, our next conversation. So I want to take you to Minneapolis, where protesters have been clashing with some of the federal agents who are in this area. In fact, you can see here how they are taking someone right there into custody at this moment. Of course, this is all a part of the continued immigration efforts that are happening in Minneapolis, but at a heightened state now that a woman, Renee Nicole Good, has been killed at the hands of ICE agents who were in that area. And this morning, at least 4 federal prosecutors resigned in Minneapolis over the probe into this. 4 federal prosecutors operating out of this area decided to step away here for their ties, the ties to the groups that have been protesting or impeding immigration enforcement efforts in Minneapolis here. So those resignations, of course, coming as tension continues to build in this area, and more and more investigations continue to spout up. So you can see all of those officers there again. This is targeted immigration enforcement that's happening in Minneapolis following, there was a surge of 2,000 agents that went to the area. Just days into that, a woman, Renee Nicole Good, was killed. Protests began, and since then, the Trump administration has said they are going to send more agents to that area. But new investigations are happening, new lawsuits that have been filed by the state of Minnesota and also the state of Illinois in terms of the enforcement efforts that have been happening in each state. We'll continue to stay on top of those developing stories there. Let me bring you to your attention something that is growing, maybe that we're unaware of, okay? It's a new trend called micro shifting. Have you heard of that? I'm new to it, but it's the new 9 to 5 for a lot of people, and we really want to know maybe even if it's a generational version of a 9 to 5 here. I want to bring in Frank Weishpot, is the CEO of Owl Labs. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, so like I said, I'm new to hearing of micro shifting. Give us your best explanation here, because I'm seeing that for some they say it's similar to like micro dosing, but for work.
Yeah, sort of. What I would say is micro shifting is really the idea of working in sort of shorter, non-linear blocks of time. So it breaks up the traditional, I go into the office at 9 a.m., I leave at 5 p.m., into shorter pieces that might make the workday more manageable for you as an employee. So by way of example, perhaps I go in at 7 and I work until 2, and then I leave early so that I can be a caregiver, and I use that 2 to 3 period of time to commute, and then I give it back at the end of the day. So I'm still working the same amount of hours. I just maybe am doing it in different time segments than we're used to traditionally.
So it could be over an 18-hour span, but we're actually working 8 hours of that, and we can definitively document that we were working in that time. Or do you think that maybe this is also a part of people saying like, oh, I was working during that time. Okay, I moved my mouse for my computer.
I think about it a little differently. I think, as we all sort of scattered to home during the pandemic in 2020, we were in this position where work changed for us overnight, right? We were used to going to the office and being there 5 days a week. And now we've sort of moved into this hybrid world, and we've lost a lot of that flexibility we had when we weren't spending all that time commuting. So I think employees really want that time back. And so we do an annual State of Hybrid Work survey of over 2,000 U.S. knowledge workers. And what we found from those workers is they overwhelmingly want some level of flexibility. It's actually their top concern right now is they don't have the level of flexibility at work that they need. Almost half of them responded that way. And then, we find certain pockets of people are more interested in doing micro shifting than others. Interestingly, but not surprisingly, caregivers are certainly 3 times more likely to try it than someone who doesn't have caregiver responsibility. And I thought the other interesting data point is that managers are actually 3 times more likely to try it than an individual contributor might be.
Very interesting. And for those of us who are in like the sandwich generation, where you could end up having parents who need more help or children who need more help, that area of caregiving could mean a lot of different things.
Correct. Yeah, I think it's sort of a blanket statement of saying there are other beings in my life that need my support, and that support doesn't necessarily come just long after I have worked a full day and commuted. So, again, I think it's really about, employees got used to some level of flexibility when they were all working from home and had more flexibility to work from home. And I think now they're trying to take some of that back because they've lost a little bit of it. In fact, about a third of overall respondents are now in the office 4 days a week, which is a material shift from what we saw in 2023. That's up almost 10 points.
Wow. Do you think that this new way of looking at working could help with retention?
I think it certainly can help with retention. I also think that during a time when the job market is more open, I think it'll be a factor in employees making a decision on where they want to work. And I think the big thing here is, technology has really enabled us to not spend so much time sitting at a desk, because while the office plays a role, it may not play a role in your entire workday. So you should have some flexibility to be in alternative locations or bring in other things that are important to you as an individual during the day that may not necessarily even be offered in times where you're not working.
Yeah, I'm pretty fascinated by this. What do you see the influence of this being like for future generations? Like if people were to look at us adopting this more into general society, what do you think the implications would be for future generations? Is it that, people wouldn't see the importance of an actual 9 to 5 anymore? How do you see this in the future?
Yeah, I don't see that. I don't see the concept of work changing dramatically. I see the concept of the location of work changing dramatically. I think as you go down to the newer entrants in the workforce, I think that you kind of look at the results from our survey, and you can see the younger you are, the more of a desire you have to be able to have some level of flexibility on your location, and this idea of just working that traditional linear full 9 to 5 workday. So and part of that is, they entered the workforce as we were all scattering from home and then trying to understand what the idea and the role of the office was going to be and how much time you were going to spend there. So I do think that, future generations will be able to live in Montana and compete for jobs in San Francisco. And it was headed that way before the pandemic. I think the pandemic just sort of, put a real sharp learning curve on it for everyone, gave everyone a taste of it. And now I think that sort of is the desired way to work.
Yeah, the pandemic put us on a escalated learning curve for many things. What we would like to know what your work schedule is.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I actually thought about that question before I came in today. So today in particular, I'm usually in the office Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, but I break up my days. So I have a young child at home, and I want to see their games, and I want to be able to participate in homework. So today I was in the office at 7 a.m., and I will probably leave here shortly after this interview to try to beat the commute traffic home so that I can spend some time with my son as he gets home from school, and then I'll finish the day from home. So I'm still putting in that same time. I'm just really making it work so that my work life and my personal life can come together neatly.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a beautiful thing. And quite honestly, just that changing nature of how we can do things. I mean, it's how and why we're able to do this show with you the way we are right now as well. We're not asking you, hey, you've got to come in. We can get to you wherever you are.
You are, and just think about it from a day-to-day perspective. I mean, I live far enough away from the office that with traffic, there were days where it was 3 to 4 hours a day sitting in traffic. Now, think about how much more I can give back to my family, to my work, to my health, and what a difference that's going to make in everybody's lives around me. And I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, because I could also see, a lot of people put off doctor's appointments or things like that because you just don't think you can get to it. Or, a lot of doctor's offices have now started doing Saturdays because people just couldn't get to it during the week. So it does allow for some other things some life to happen during the week that maybe people put off as a result of that tightly constrained 9 to 5. Tell us a little bit more about Owl Labs.
Yeah, so Owl Labs is a video conferencing hardware provider. So we have a piece of hardware that sits at the center of the table, and it sort of puts all the participants in view when they're speaking. So it uses AI to make that determination. So therefore, as you're a remote participant in a meeting where there might be 5, 6, 7 people in the office, it's always focused on the active speaker in this way that you're used to seeing the speaker face first. And so it makes you a much more active participant than a traditional view of having the camera sit on the wall, so that you're almost looking at it like you're looking down a bowling alley.
All of this is about getting into the things that are non-traditional, but it is quite odd to look at a camera, a static camera, as being non-traditional now. We've come to that point very quickly.
Yeah, things have escalated quickly in the last 5 years.
Yeah, were there some surprising findings about this study to you? I mean, why did you all do this study?
So we actually started doing this study before 2020. So we used to call it the state of remote work. And then when hybrid work started to become a thing after 2020, we changed it to the state of hybrid work. Again, it was this idea that you should be able to have a job in another city and live wherever you desire. And that trend was growing nicely. And then, when everything changed with the pandemic, it obviously went through the roof. And so this gives us the opportunity to really be experts on the idea of remote and hybrid work, which is what we support with our technology. And it's a pretty material study that is done on an annual basis. And we always look forward to bringing it to light, really, so that companies can understand what employees are thinking and how they're thinking about remote work, so they can make decisions on how they buy technology and what policies they put in place.
Yeah, just going over some of this, they found over half of workers, 51% of workers, schedule personal appointments during traditional work hours. 70% of managers believe that working hybrid or remotely has made their team more productive. 87% of employees use or have experimented with AI in their work, and 38% of workers say their level of work-related stress has increased since last year. The other maybe side of viewing a lot of this is people feeling like we are becoming a society that maybe is less in tune with like fellowship one with another, and that some of these things kind of point to that.
Yeah, I do think, again, I said this earlier, but the office has a role. Interacting with other humans has a role. If you think about entering the workforce during a time where you may be working for a company that's primarily hybrid or partially remote, if it's your first job and you have a laptop that gets shipped to you, and your first day's responsibility is to open that laptop and join a Zoom meeting, how do you create those human connections that are they're going to help you learn? You're going to build those. Most of the relationships I have from early stages of my career still exist today. How are you going to, move forward in a world where you may not have that mentorship, you may not have those connections, you may not have that network, because in large part relationships are built as you're walking down the hall, not necessarily when you're sitting in front of a computer and having a video meeting where you're talking about a very specific topic. So again, this is still the early stages of remote and hybrid work.
Yeah, we'll see where things go from here. But a very interesting study. Thank you so much for sharing more about micro shifting with us. We appreciate it. We learn something new every day here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, you take care. Let me tell you a little bit more about what we're expecting in this 2 o'clock hour, everyone. Right around 2:45 or so, we're anticipating a conversation with the Center on Halstead. They are closely monitoring what's happening in Washington, D.C. There at the Supreme Court as they weigh this heavy decision about transgender students in sports. I told you at the beginning of our broadcast today what it was looking like, the direction it looked like the Supreme Court might go in. According to experts who have been closely monitoring it as well. But we're going to talk to them about their conversation that they're expected to have. It's hosted by Trans Upfront and the Chicago Therapy Collective about the cases. They're going to be talking about it. In fact, as we take you back live here to Washington, D.C., if you remember in the 1 o'clock hour, there were tons of protesters who were right outside there of the Supreme Court. We heard of some arrests that were even taking place, but now it's pretty empty outside of there. So again, we're going to talk with the Center on Halstead about their upcoming event and how they see this issue progressing. Also, around 2:30, we're going to talk about new data that's just out today regarding cancer in our area, lead that's in the pipes of one of our local cities, of course, that it could elevate that risk of cancer for many people. We'll be talking more about that. And when we come back from this break, we might have a little smack talk going on. We're getting ready for another very big game for the Bears coming up this weekend. We have more data on it now. We know that it's going to be Sunday, 5:30 our time. We know where it's going to be airing, but we also know who we're going to be playing. We're going to be playing the Rams. And so we're bringing in a sports anchor from LA. Yeah, we got to get ready. A little smack talk on the way right after this. 2 minutes and we're back. $2:19 right now. Thanks everybody for staying with us here on Chicago Live. We are still enjoying the afterglow, if you will, of a wonderful game against the Packers where the Bears came up with a big win. And so now we move on to our next big opponent. I want to bring in an anchor from our sister station, Mark Ragonadino, who is a sports anchor in LA. Thank you so much for your time.
Great to be here, and yeah, I mean, I heard the lead in right there, a little trash talk, right off the bat. Huh? So let me kick things off here. Then we're about to hit 72 degrees out here in Southern California today, so it's gonna be tough to beat that.
Tough to beat that, but we look at it as maybe Mother Nature kind of playing into our hand that we're looking at below zero wind chills for you all to usher you into our environment on Sunday. What a wonderful thing for us.
Looking forward to Soldier Field being rocking. I actually have a little sweet spot in my heart for one side of my family that grew up out in that area in the Deerfield and Highland Park and Highwood area. So I know about some of those cold winters there on the lake. But as we're talking about this game, that is one of my concerns. Matthew Stafford the Rams quarterback hasn't exactly had the best record in some cold weather games. Just look to last year when they lost to the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC playoffs. So hoping this year is going to be a turnaround. And by the way, I'm not sure if you're aware of this history. It was 40 years ago yesterday that these teams met in the NFC Championship, which of course was part of that great road on the way to the 85 championship season for your Chicago Bears.
That is true. We know that history around here quite well. We definitely are hoping, we're hoping for the same results this time around. Let me ask you this. As you're studying the Bears, what do you pick up for your opponents on Sunday?
The big thing that's going to be one of the matchups is actually the Rams receiving core against the Bears secondary. You saw some of the Packers receivers be able to get free and get open for some good looks. And I think that if Matthew Stafford can connect, obviously Puka Nacua is one of the best receivers in the NFL, but you look at the possibility of Terrence Ferguson, a really athletic tight end coming back from a hamstring injury. You've already got Colby Parkinson, who caught the game-winning touchdown this past weekend, who's looked pretty good. So I think the matchup between the Bears secondary, can they keep track of the Rams receiving core and make life difficult for them? And certainly you would think that the conditions would actually help in that aspect.
Yeah, and you mentioned a few injuries there. Matthew Stafford having the finger injury. Now, is this a lot of times before games there's a lot of hype about an injury and really it's nothing, or sometimes there really is a bad injury that players try to play through? Which one do you think it is?
Somewhere just a little more mild than bad injury. And if there's anything I've learned about Matthew Stafford since him coming here to Southern California and not only leading the Rams to a Super Bowl, but really being one of the better West Coast teams for the last 4 or 5 years, it's that the guy is a gamer. He's going to be fine. He's going to be able to play through whatever is ailing him in that finger. I think you even saw it in the second half against Carolina. He was still throwing the ball a pretty good zip in outdoor conditions out there. So I'm not worried about Stafford at all, to be honest. I'm not really worried about the Rams offense. I think that the one thing, if you're a Bears fan, that you're looking at is the fact that this Bears team has continued to find ways to do it. They're, one of the best second half teams in the NFL, especially in the second half of the season. That Caleb Magic, the magic carpet ride, as they're calling it for. They're calling the magic carpet ride for this team that continues to find the way to fly their way into wins, especially late in the fourth quarter. That's something that's real, I think, at this time of year. And I saw that speech from Caleb with Coach Ben Johnson in the locker room, how emotional that team got, how together they seem to be. I think those are real things that play in favor of the Bears.
And Ben Johnson does have a connection to Matthew Stafford. How do you think that will help or hurt?
I think because personnel changes at this point, I don't think it's going to be a huge factor. Does he know some of his tendencies? Of course he does. Does he know from Matthew Stafford probably saying in the past, hey, I don't like it when pressure comes from this part of the field. I don't like it when a defense does this to me. You're going to try and use those things. But remember, Stafford knows he's had those conversations too. So Stafford, it's going to be that chess match. It's going to be Stafford saying, I've told him this in the past. I know that this is what he knows that I do and don't like. So we need to trend away from that or, really lean into that. Those are going to be, I expect this actually, despite what we're talking about temperatures, I expect both teams to get in the 20s in this game. So I think we're talking about a really good, another good, as you guys just had, another really good back and forth affair.
Yeah. And if we're being honest, one of our challenging points has been that a lot of our success comes in that second half. If you're being honest about your team, maybe what's the biggest challenge for you all?
I think the biggest challenge for the Rams will be if they do get into the lead, do they play well from the front? You saw it this past week against Carolina. They had a chance right before halftime to hit Puka Nacua for what would have been a third first-half touchdown. And I think if they the ball hit him in the hands, he dropped it. If they hit that, they go with a double-digit lead into halftime likely, and I think they actually win the game by double digits. But they didn't do that, right? So if they get out in front early, can they then really just press down on the Bears and not give them that little bit of hope, that light at the end of the tunnel to think, wait, we've been here before. We've done this in previous games this year. They have to play from the front with strength and authority. And I hate to use this phrase, but right, you want to put your foot on their back and say, you're not getting up this time.
Well, we certainly have gotten back up many, many times before, and we're hoping that we're not even in that situation this time around. We want them to, from out the gate, have some energy about themselves and really watch this. We call them the cardiac bears. Have you heard us call them that?
And I will say this one thing as a guy who loved the Bears in the 80s, I wouldn't mind seeing a new rendition of the Super Bowl Shuffle if the Bears do, in fact, make their way back to the big game in a couple of weeks.
I think some folks are probably working on some things. I think right now they're all in it's Chicago mode right now. But let me ask you, as the Rams have really been one of the teams to watch the entire season. I mean, for the Bears, people have kind of come along. Our season, we've gained strength as it's gone. We're a team that has younger players, that a new coach, and things have been gelling along the way, maybe hitting a stride at the right time. But, what we looked like at the beginning of the season did not give us the idea that we'd be where we are now. For your team, for the Rams, do you think like you all are living up to the expectation at the beginning of the season, or where do you see things?
No question, the Rams have shown flashes this season that they are clearly one of the elite teams in the NFL. And so when you mentioned coaching and Ben Johnson, when you get to this point in the season and you look at the Rams head coach and Sean McVay, he's pretty much seen it all, including taking his team all the way to the top to win the Super Bowl a few years ago. So the Rams, and you mentioned your young team for the Bears, the Rams have a lot of players that experience in this type of scenario, that are experienced into this point of the season. And I think that could be one of the things really that pushes them over the top. So to answer your question about living up to expectations, I do think, and that's the reason why Matthew Stafford is a front runner for the NFL MVP this season, I do think they have lived up to the expectations. But have they done it consistency would probably question 1A or 1B, excuse me. Have they done it consistently? No, they have not. And this is an opportunity to show that they can do that.
Okay. Just on a final note here, what's it been like covering them this season for you?
Really good. I mean, the Rams, Sean McVay on any given day can open up the book a little bit and give you some really good things to think about. I think the emergence of a player like Blake Corum to now have a 1-2 punch in the backfield has been something great. I mean, the connection between Matthew Stafford and Davante Adams in just 1 year together. I mean, Bears fans know all about Davante Adams from his days with the Packers, has been really good as well. And the emergence of the defense getting better over the course of the year, getting some guys back from injury, a defense now that's gone on a couple of years without having former defensive mastermind in Aaron Donald. The way that they've come together more as a collective unit has also been a really big positive for the Rams. So I think there's a lot of positive storylines, as there is for both teams, if we're being totally transparent and honest here. And that's why I think this could be the game of the weekend.
Well, we'll all be tuned in for sure, and we'll call you back if the Rams lose. If you all win, we don't know.
Sounds like a side wager over here. Okay.
Mark, we don't know you by Monday if y'all win, but if you lose, you're welcome back here anytime. Take care. Thank you so much for your time. It's about 2:30, everyone. Great conversation. It's friendly banter at this point in time. And like I said, I don't think the level of smack talk in any venue is going to rise to the level of what it was last weekend, primarily because it was the Packers. We'll see what happens this weekend. We're certainly hoping for another Bears win around here. Bear down. It's 2:30. We're back after this. Okay, 2:32, and before we get to our next conversation, I want to tell you about the breaking news we just saw right before we came back on here. A statement that Mike Tomlin, the coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers, is stepping down. This just came out, and the statement from Mike Tomlin says, after much thought and reflection, I have decided to step down as head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. The organization has been a huge part of my life for many years. It's been an absolute honor to lead this team. I am deeply grateful to Art Rooney and the late Ambassador Rooney for their trust and support. I'm also thankful to the players who gave everything they had every day, and the coaches and staff whose commitment and dedication made this journey so meaningful. It goes on, and I'm just going to read the last part of it. It says, while this chapter comes to a close, my respect and love for the Pittsburgh Steelers will never change. I am excited for what the future holds for this organization, and I will forever be grateful for my time coaching in Pittsburgh. Very interesting development as they lost to the Texans last night, and there were a lot of questions as to whether Mike Tomlin and also Aaron Rodgers would be coming back for next season, whether Aaron Rodgers would be retiring and whether Mike Tomlin might even be fired. But there was a lot of conversation as to the respect that Mike Tomlin should receive after so many winning seasons over the years, even though not a lot of playoff wins, but winning seasons over the years, over 20 years, that he should have the respect of being able to make a decision on his own. He has decided to step down. Mike Tomlin of the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, it's about 2:34 now. We're moving on with our discussions here, coming back here to home to the city of Aurora now. I want to read this to you. The city of Aurora's water production division has discovered elevated levels of lead in drinking water in some homes. That automatically perks up ears, brings about a lot of questions and maybe similarities to other stories that we have heard. So I'm so glad that we have the Director of Public Works, Jason Bauer, joining me now. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Really appreciate the conversation here. Obviously, I wish that it wasn't under these circumstances, because when people hear about lead in the water, you immediately think, about what happened in Michigan years ago. Give me some comparison, some contrast here.
Yeah, it's a little different in Aurora than it was in Flint, Michigan. Flint, Michigan, so at the city of Aurora, the water that we treat that leaves the treatment plant, there's no lead in the water that leaves the plant. And there's really no water until it gets to the lead services, which are the pipes that take the water from the water main out in the street into the home. That's really the only place that you're going to get lead. Within the home, there's also a potential for lead piping and lead in the solder that connects copper pipes. So the water is safe. The only area that you're going to get any exposure is with the lead service lines, and that's why the city is proactively removing lead services and replacing them with copper, just like every other municipality and water utility within the state.
So when you talk about removing the lead surfaces, does that speak to the age of the pipes that are there?
A lot of times it will. Yeah, we found that anything built since 1980 is not going to have a lead service line. So anything before 1980 might not necessarily have lead, but we've done significant inventories. Just again, every other water utility customer or water utility provider in the state has to do inventories to determine exactly where they have lead service lines, how many service lines they have that are lead. And again, anything 1980 and previous is going to be where there's going to be lead service lines. Mm-hmm. So the city of Aurora has about 50,000 services, and we started out with about 19,000 that were lead.
Okay. All right. And that was going to be my next question. Like how big of an area are we talking about? Is this throughout the city? Is it a portion of the city? What are we looking at?
Yeah, it's a portion of the city. It's the older portion of the city, closer to the downtown. And again, we started out with about 19,000 lead services, and we've already replaced 3,000.
Tell me a little bit about some of the other things that you all are doing here to address this.
Yeah, sure. So we are mandated to test twice a year. So we test 100 homes 2 times a year, and then we look at those 100 homes and we look at the 90th home. So we rank them from the lowest lead reading to the highest lead reading, and then we look at that 90th one. And if that exceeds the state limit, then that's when we have to put out the mandatory notice. So really nothing has changed with the water. It's just there's a little bit of a change in how we're reporting and making things known, and that's where we release things to the public in this manner. So in addition to replacing lead service lines, we are also, for the past 3 years, we've been working with Illinois Environmental Protection Agency on a corrosion control study at our water treatment plant. And that's going to help us find different ways to treat the water while we're still going to replace all these lead service lines. It's going to take us a while to do it. So what we're trying to do is treat the water in a way that makes it even less corrosive so that we can have even less lead in the homes that do have lead service lines.
Mm-hmm. And of course, lead in the water, tell me from a health perspective, if you can, how much lead becomes a problem for people?
So right now the action level is 15 parts per billion, and that's the cutoff. And again, that's where we look at our 90th test and see if it exceeded that number. And once you're exceeding that number, for instance, for these 100 homes that we tested, so we had 26 homes that were above that level. And what we're going to do is we're going to put them on a replacement list and we're going to replace them. If anyone else knows that they have a lead service line, even if they're below that threshold, there's devices that you can get a simple picture. There's a number of brands that are available at Home Depot and various different stores where you can go and you can just have that water to drink. And if it's an extra layer of precaution. And then there's other things such as on our website, we have a lot of good pointers for people on things that they can do. Say, you're going to use that water for cooking. Maybe you do a load of laundry first thing in the morning, or you take a shower before you make your pot of coffee. Just getting that water flushed out of the lead service line where it's been sitting overnight is just good practice, just to make sure that you're getting that flushed out and then you're getting fresh water from the main.
Tell me some other things that we can be doing individually to mitigate our risk.
Well, those are two good ones right there. You know, before you're going to use, if you have a lead service line, there's nothing wrong with going out and getting a lead pitcher. You can also send your water off to get tested. In Illinois or in Aurora, we don't actually do any of the testing, but if someone reaches out to our water treatment plant, we can suggest some places where you could send your water samples to get it tested to see if you are above that elevated risk, that elevated level of risk. And then you can also reach out to our engineering division after that, and we can work with you to get your line replaced. So being proactive with a filter, flushing the line out first thing in the morning, those are all great things that you can do to safeguard yourself.
And what is the replacement process? Like, what is that like for a homeowner?
So for a homeowner, it's pretty hands off for the homeowner themselves. We take care of everything. We'll come out, we'll reach out to the people and let them know that we'd like to replace their line. We tell them exactly what the process is going to entail, which generally is we dig a hole at the water main in the street. We dig a hole in the front yard where the shutoff is, and then we just bore it directly into the house, and then we connect it to the meter, and we patch the foundation, and we fill up the holes and reseed them and patch the roadway. And then we just tell them to, keep an eye on it and give us a call in 6 months. So if they want to have their water retested, we can do that for them. And as soon as we start that process, we always give people, the city will actually provide a lead filter device at that time so that they've got something on hand while everything settles down after the construction.
Can you speak to what elevated levels of lead over time does to a person?
Yeah, so it's more dangerous to someone who might be pregnant or to young children. It can have, it's been shown to have an effect on learning disabilities. If someone's exposed to it for a long time, so learning, behavioral issues, things like that. Water is not typically the primary source of lead that might lead to those things. It's in the soil, it's in a lot of paint. So there's a number of ways people can be exposed. So educating yourself, especially homeowners in older homes that might have lead paint or lead paint on their door frames or their window frames that are opening and closing a lot and creating lead dust. Just being aware of the different ways that you could be exposed. But yeah, typically it's going to be younger people and pregnant people.
And when you speak of older homes, can you give us a time frame if somebody's thinking like, is my home a part of that?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when they switched from lead-based paint over to latex and oil-based, but I would speculate that anything, up through into the 50s or so. But yeah, that would be something good to look into. And I believe you can get tests for that too.
Okay. Are there other things that you're trying to educate the public about right now where this is concerned that maybe we haven't covered, something that you think it's important for them to know about what's happening or what will be happening?
Specific to Aurora, yeah, we're doing our annual testing. We're staying on top of our replacements. We've actually worked really well with the IEPA and have secured federal funding to the tune of about $9 million. So that has replaced over the past number of years about 900 service lines. So the city is actively doing what we can to get as much funding as possible to replace lines as quickly as we can. When the funding is there, we'll work our best to replace them. And we are going to move forward until all of them are replaced. Again, we started around between 18 and 19,000, and we've taken care of 3, so we're already under 16,000. And our plan is to aggressively replace as many as we can. And that's really where we want to go. And that treatment study that we're working on with the IEPA, we're about done with that. So we might even start working on changing the treatment process at the plant to lower the corrosivity as soon as this year. So if someone does have a lead line, and it's going to be a little while before we can get to replace it because there are a number of them, at least we're going to be making some steps to try and lower those, the lead levels. It basically, what we're looking to do is just change the treatment a little bit so that the water doesn't leach as much lead from those lead service lines when it sits in there for a long period of time, like overnight. And we're looking to possibly implement that as soon as the next few months.
Jason, thank you so much for your time again. We really appreciate it. And please keep us updated on you all's progress.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Take care. It's about 2:44, everyone. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back to our discussion about the Transgender sports and athletes, what the Supreme Court will be deciding on that, and what our Center on Halsted here in Chicagoland is doing tonight and moving forward to address it. .246 right now. Thank you so much for staying with us here on Chicago Live. Moving on to a discussion about what's happening at the Supreme Court today as we give you this live picture here. Not seeing the protesters that we did earlier today, but we certainly saw quite a few people who were gathered outside of those walls there, who were all gathered to address this issue of transgender students in sports, and starting to hear how the Supreme Court could be leaning in this case. Meanwhile, the Center on Halsted is going to be the site of an important discussion. This is coming up. It's going to be hosted by Trans Up Front and the Chicago Therapy Collective. And I want to bring in Asher McMayer to talk a little bit about what they're doing and how they're working to inform people better. Asher is the founder and executive director of Trans Up Front Illinois. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
I want to just start off by getting your reaction to what we were seeing at the Supreme Court today, with people gathering outside, starting to hear how the Supreme Court is leaning on this case.
You know, we want to keep our hopes high. I think it's great that we've had so much support. I am very lucky to be on the National Committee for SCOTUS response for this case for Hecox PBJ. And we haven't had great luck with SCOTUS in the past year, but we want to continue to move forward and support our trans students and all of their needs and make sure that they are truly included throughout their education and with their peers.
Yeah, when you speak of supporting trans students, give me your interaction, what you're hearing from students who are caught up in this. I mean, this is a discussion that's gone way above their heads, but does directly affect them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we look at the Supreme Court case, there are actually two cases being heard, right? We have West Virginia versus PBJ, which is about a girl named Becky, who is a middle schooler who just wanted to try out for sports, right? And be part of a team, do something that she loves. We know that physical education, we know that having community goes a long way for any youth, especially a youth of a marginalized identity. And then, of course, we have little V. Hecox, which again is another case of a kid who just wants to be part of a team. We're seeing it here in Illinois as well. As we support our youth, we want to make sure that we are really viewing each child as who they are, what they enjoy. Most of these kids, we're not talking about kids who are going to the national whatever it is, right? These are kids who just want to play on their school's team or play on a club team or do something for fun. The number of trans athletes is very minimal in this in our country. And, you know, there are so many aspects about trans people that I think are really being left out in the conversation as we talk about things like HRT. I was able to listen to oral arguments today, and a lot of it was really based on you know, that biology part, people arguing, well, testosterone, well, a lot of these kids, they are on HRT, they have very low testosterone, as low as a cis female. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this case.
Yeah, you know, I mean, there is that discussion. You brought up club versus the scholastic sports, and it does become a different type of issue when you're talking about scholarships being on the line or something of that sort. How do you see that? How do you weigh that aspect of it?
You know, I think that it's a case by case basis. In a majority of cases, when we're talking about trans athletes, we're talking about middle schoolers who want to be on their school's volleyball team or a high schooler who wants to run cross country. Yes, they may be going for scholarships, and schools all have their different regulations. And even with the Olympics has their different regulations as it pertains to your hormone levels. And one of the topics that came up today in oral arguments is, you know, what does that look like? Is hormone levels enough? Are there other advantages or disadvantages to a trans athlete? But I feel like at the end of the day, when we're looking at the legal issues, which is this discrimination on the basis of Title IX and the Equal Protection Clause? And we know based on our Constitution that discrimination on the basis of gender identity is not allowed. And so I'm really interested to see how all of this pans out. I'll be the first to say I've been working with trans youth for 10 years. I joke and I call, you know, sports ball. I'm not a sports person. And I'm learning along the way as it pertains to the sports side of things. But, you know, when we're talking about a demographic that has such a high rate of mental health, suicide ideation, those type of things, allowing kids to play, to be part of a team, to be excited about going to school, about having challenge, you know, they're just kids wanting to be kids. Yeah. Just like anyone else.
I remember watching, I think it was last season. So I ran track all my life. And I remember watching a track meet, a state track meet in California that became very controversial. There was an athlete who was participating, a transgender athlete who was participating, and there was more of a, okay, you know, listening to the parents of some of the girls who may place second or third, and maybe they would place first before, but then also listening to the story of this trans athlete who, you know, just wants to find somewhere to belong. Very difficult.
It is. It's so difficult. And we're talking about athletes like this, right? They are putting in just as much work as everyone else, if not more. I mean, they are putting their body through hormones and so much to be who they are, to feel comfortable in their skin, to find that outlet that brings them joy. Could another person, a cisgender girl, place second? Could they have always placed second? Could there have been another girl who, until you start doing blood work, is really intersex and has more testosterone? I mean, not every person is identical. There are cis people who have naturally high level of testosterone. So are we going to have it that every person has to do blood work in order to play? You know, how are we going to look at this from a true equality and equity standpoint?
So tell me about the conversation that you all are getting ready to have, and the information that people need to know if they want to be a part of it.
Yeah, so tonight, doors open at 6 o'clock at Center on Halstead. It's a free event. We're going to be having a panel. That panel is going to feature a mental health provider, a parent of a trans athlete. We actually have a student athlete as well. Myself and several other leader of a trans sports organization, and we're going to just talk about what's going on in the world. I think right now more than ever it's important to stay up to date on what's happening in the Supreme Court and in all levels of our legislative process, because our community is so targeted and under attack that we want to make sure that we're staying informed. And unfortunately, at the Supreme Court level, it's not like these cases outline what they are, right? You hear Cox PBJ and you're like, what did you just say? And so half the battle for us when we're talking about SCOTUS cases is education, is understanding what the potential outcomes are. You know, in this case, we're talking about the potential elimination of gender identity from Title IX and the Equal Protection Clause, which would be devastating, not just within sports, just across the board for trans people. And so we want to make sure the community stays aware. And then, of course, after that conversation, we're having a community dinner with all sports related foods, all the foods you get at the stadium, right? Your burgers, your hot dogs, etc. And coming together as a community to have great conversation, to be with each other, and just enjoy a night knowing that we're going to have to wait another 6 months to find out the decision.
And that's the big part of it, that the decision is not coming today. Even though the discussion was happening today, the decision is still a ways off. Let me ask you this. What are your other areas of concern moving forward outside of this major issue that's being taken up by the Supreme Court right now?
You know, I think right now, as it pertains to trans youth, they're being attacked from all sides. And at Trans Up Front, that's what we do. We work with trans youth at a state level. And so we try so hard to make sure that each kid grows up to be the incredible trans adult they're supposed to be, whether it's, you know, playing with their friends at sports, going to school, and just being able to be who they are every day and get an education, getting access to medical care, really just showing up for these youth. That way they know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel and they're going to grow up, and this is going to be a distant memory as we continue to affirm them and who they are.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And again, everyone, the decision is still far off as to how the Supreme Court will weigh in on this. But today, the Supreme Court did appear to be sympathetic to state bans on transgender girls competing on female sports teams. We'll see what ultimately becomes their decision on the record. It's 2:57, though. We're going to take a quick break, just about 2 minutes. Our next guest is already on the line, so I'm excited to have that next conversation after this. All right, everyone, it's just about 3 o'clock right now, and if there's one thing that we've said a lot over the last few days, given our win over the Packers over the weekend, we kind of feel like a blessed city right now. But seriously, we've said that even since the Pope was selected, who was, from Chicagoland. And so there's a new campaign called Pray with the Pope, and the Archdiocese of Chicago is joining in on this. And joining me right now, Cardinal Blaise Cupich is here. I am honored to have you here, a part of Chicago Live. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Now, have you been following the Bears season?
Oh, yes, I sure have. And they're nail biters up until the end, aren't they?
They sure are. Hail Marys. But let's talk a little bit about this new campaign, Pray with the Pope. Tell us about it.
Well, the Pope has always had, in former popes, an intention every month. And they rolled it out, just before the month begins. What is different here is Pope Leo has given us the full year of intentions to pray for. And he says that these are the things he's going to be praying for each month. And he's inviting us to join him in prayer, just as we would in other times with other popes. But he's giving us the full scope of what the intentions are.
And, I really feel like this is another way of showing that Pope Leo really is doing things differently than what we've seen before. Like, we're just starting to see some things. I remember there was like the social media conference or something of that sort that happened early on, that he's doing some new things in different ways.
He is, he's very accessible through very mass media means by these kind of electronic ways. Pardon me, I have to sneeze.
Oh, it's
I was
okay.
outside and
Bless you.
I was outside and it's 55 degrees outside and I think we're getting some pollen already.
It's quite all right. It's quite all right. Tell me a little bit more about how people can participate in this.
Well, we're going to publicize it in all of our parishes with the intentions for the month and encourage people. There's a particular prayer as well that the Pope has composed, and we'll be sending that out as well. We're going to try to encourage as many people as possible to participate in this and see that when they pray, they're not praying alone. They're praying with Pope Leo, our Chicago's own son.
Yes, a son of Chicago and a Pope for all. When you look at just how this last year has flown by, what are your thoughts on, like, what was that, May to now? How much of a whirlwind it's been?
Well, it has been, but what's quite remarkable is that he seems to have been made for the job. He came out of central casting. He hit the ground running, and every day he has a very full schedule and seems to be a very much at peace. I was with him just last week for the consistory and had a chance to talk to him, and he's very serene. He's got things in hand, and he listens to other people. He doesn't seem to be in any way upset by any new development. He kind of is taking life as it comes, and really, I have to say, he's very admirable in the way he's handling himself.
What do you think changes with having an American Pope, like fundamentally? That before he was selected, people thought, there'll never be one, and now here we are.
Well, I think that it's going to be different for especially Catholics in the United States to hear someone speak like they do, speak English. Popes in the past have spoken English, but it's their second or third language, heavily accented. But he speaks in a way that we recognize. And I think that is going to cause us to have a different perspective, maybe more attentive ear to what he has to say. And also, he's very familiar what's going on, not only in the United States, but in Chicago. He keeps up on things and knows, what the new developments are, and he's willing to talk about that.
What do you think are some of the greatest areas of concern that need prayer right now?
Well, I know he's very concerned about what's happening with immigration. He has already spoken about this, and we as a bishops' conference have already. He just wants to make sure that whatever is done, people are treated with respect and very humanely. When that doesn't happen, we have to say something about it. Nobody is against a country protecting its borders or making sure that we're safe as a country. But what's important to keep in mind is that the people who are here, even without documents, in many ways have been here for a long time, supported their families, paid taxes, raised children. And so there has to be a new way in which we're going to deal with this issue. We need significant immigration reform, and I think that the Holy Father feels that very strongly.
Mm-hmm. So how will the new Pray with the Pope, how will the topics be, labeled? Where do we start with it?
Well, in fact, the whole list, you can get that from our office. We do have the nice way of getting all of that out. For instance, just in this month of January, the intention is that we pray with the Word of God. Next month, we pray for children with incurable diseases. And then also in March, we pray for disarmament and peace. So you'll be able to find out what these are either from the Vatican website or our own, but we'll be pushing this information out.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we saw another father from our area go on and be elevated recently. Will you be staying with us?
Oh, yeah. I think you're talking about Archbishop Designate Hicks, who was in Joliet. He's going to the Archdiocese in New York.
Yes.
And so, yes, we're very proud of him. He's a great priest. He's going to do well. I'm 70. I'm going to be 77 in March, so I'm here to stay. And I love Chicago, even when I retire, and which I hope is going to be in the near future. I'll stay here in Chicago.
Well, we love to be able to speak to you. You're always a great representative of our area, and we appreciate being able to look to you for that. Before I let you go, again, I've got to circle back to the Bears. What's your prayer? Can we get some divine intervention for the Bears this weekend?
My prayer is that we win big, not just win, win big. I think we our team has the potential. We've got great players, and I think that we would just, it'd be nice to score some of those points in the first half rather than waiting to the fourth quarter, because these nail biters, are not good for the heart.
Preach. Thank you so much. We certainly appreciate being able to talk to you so much. Cardinal Cupich, thank you for your time today.
Great. Good to be with you all.
Take care. Oh boy, it's good that he has a sense of humor. It's about 3:08 right now. We're going to take a quick break, everyone, and then we're going to continue on. We're going to go from, talking. We've had some really interesting conversations today. We've kind of been all over the place here, but now we're going to the moon when we come back. 2 minutes and we're back. 3:10, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us here on Chicago Live. This will be quite the conversation here. You know, when you think of places where maybe you want to get a reservation for a nice hotel, have you ever thought of the moon? It might become an option for you. Galactic Resources Utilization Space announced today that they are opening applications for aspiring moon tourists. And I'm going to bring in Skylar Chan now to talk to us about this new opportunity that maybe some folks will check out. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey everyone, my name is Skylar. I'm the founder and CEO of GRU Space. Nice to meet you guys.
So tell me how this came to be. Where'd the conversation even come up to say maybe people will want to, book a room at the moon?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me personally, I've always wanted to be an astronaut and fly to space since I was like 3. I was an Air Force trained pilot when I was 16. Oh. And, I basically realized like, hey, we're born as one moment in human history where we can actually become interplanetary in our lifetime. And I spent, the entirety of my college experience at UC Berkeley, where I just graduated early, to understand like what is the best wedge to making this happen, and decided that, hey, let's build the first hotel on the moon. Let's take a huge swing, and we're going to make humanity interplanetary that way. So, yeah.
Wow. All right. Now you are aiming to have this facility open by 2032. How does that happen? Give me your timeline between 2026 and 2032.
Yeah, so it's a very ambitious timeline, right? I want to confirm that it's like an estimated date for 2032 opening. You can think about building a hotel on the moon as a very complex systems engineering challenge, right? Like, how do we break that down? Fundamentally, it's a habitat, right? And we want to keep people alive. And so working backwards from that, we've outlined a very complex roadmap to basically ensure that we de-risk the core technologies to make this happen. The core problem is off-world surface habitation. And so our first mission is aimed for 2029, where we want to build humanity's first ever brick on the moon, right? Prove to the world that we can make stuff on the moon. And we also want to demonstrate that we can have an inflatable habitable space, right? That starts small, with a very small 10 kilogram payload that we hope to land on the moon. And then we use that as a stepping stone to get to eventually building that hotel.
Now, are you looking to build a hotel that looks like what we've seen here, all over Chicago, or something we haven't even conceptualized yet?
Yeah, like a hotel on the moon is obviously something that is your average hotel. Let's just say that. And so, the first versions are obviously, very early, and they're going to be early iterations on this. But as we continue to solve that problem of off-world surface habitation, right, which is, again, a problem that is so exciting, right? No one's ever solved that problem yet. The concepts of the hotel will continue to emerge. I think one thing to highlight is that it's modular, and we're intentionally using resources on the moon to help us construct, which is a really cool concept called in situ resource utilization. That's actually why the name of the company is Galactic Resource Utilization. It's because long term, we hope to eventually help humanity use resources for the entire galaxy.
Wow. Have you thought through like safety concerns like oxygen?
Oh, yeah. Like safety is like the very first, thing for a lot of people and for us, right, when it comes to mind on the moon. And so a lot of those, factors are part of our roadmap that we want to demonstrate and prove out before we open the hotel. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is actually on our white paper, which is gru.space/WP.
So this will require being able to stay at your hotel for the moon tourist would require a $1 million deposit.
You can imagine going to the moon is not cheap.
Skylar.
Look, we opened up applications yesterday when we launched. And so there's an application fee, and if accepted, then you'll be invited to put down a deposit to stay at the moon hotel.
Oh my goodness. And how many people are you anticipating to have in the beginning? Where are you trying to get with this? I mean, honestly, we laugh, we joke about it now, but You think about like Amazon founders, his trips to space that he's been doing. There was a time when we laughed and joked about that until he was able to do it. So I want to say I'm half-hearted in laughing about it. Maybe you'll be able to pull this off. So yeah, how many people are you anticipating accommodating?
Yeah, no, it's going to be a select few, obviously, and it's going to be the ones who are the pioneers and are bold enough to really lead humanity in this new era of really human exploration, right? And so we're aiming for a couple, very select handful of people to join us on that mission, and that's going to look like 4 people for now.
And I mentioned Jeff Bezos's efforts. Have you tried to like coordinate something? Like when we go on these websites that have for these travel websites, and they have plane, hotel, and the car, and maybe you want to bundle it. Have you thought about working out this space moon bundle here?
It's an all-inclusive bundle. Yeah, I obviously, we can't comment on the specifics on, the launch provider or anything like that. But yeah, no, it's going to be quite the trip of a lifetime. Literally honeymoon on the moon. Adds another level to that.
It does, yeah, and hopefully you can come back and live a long life and all as well. There's a lot of risk in that, but yeah, again, maybe it'll happen. Let me ask you this: what is the reception that you get from people? When they hear about this, even before opening it up for applications. But what do people actually take this seriously? Do they say like, oh yeah, I can totally see where you're going with this and I'm on board? Or is it met with skepticism? Like, what is the reception you get?
Surprisingly, it's actually been better than I thought. I think to your point, right? Like every technological revolution or revolution that really drives human history, like a Promethean moment, is always met by a lot of people who are skeptics, right, in the beginning. And when we solve off-world surface habitation, right, it's a Promethean moment that will lead to billions of human lives that can be born on the moon and Mars, right? And so I remember when I started, and I think that's incredible, right? And so when I started this back, thinking about this for the longest time when I was a kid, to high school, to college, honestly, yeah, a lot of people were like, oh, this is like too crazy, kid, like, don't do this or whatever. But I just kind of stuck to what I believed in, and I'm very fortunate that I have found a great group of people who, friends, advisors, investors, and team that really believes in this, right? Because the time is now for humanity to become interplanetary, and we really need to rally together the world to make this happen, right? This is a team effort, right? But it's team humanity is really what we're putting out there.
Yeah, people might laugh now and then they'll be like, why didn't I have that idea someday? How do you pick a location on the moon, or is it just wherever you land?
Yeah, location is really important, right? And, there's some areas that are, the way that we think about it is where are places that have good sunlight, where are places that are accessible to partners who are going to provide different services, right? Where are the most easy places to land that are feasible for our landing partners to work with, right? Those are some of the ways that we think about where to land. But these are things that, the confirmation of these or the release of these, stay tuned.
Okay, well, we hope that you will come back when you have some more information, some more progress that's happened. You'll have to let us know how things go, okay?
Will do.
All right.
Maybe we'll have you guys on the moon.
Hey, maybe we will do this interview on the moon. Yes.
Yes.
Who knows
That'll
where we'll
awesome.
be. 2032, yeah. Who knows where we will be. But continue to let us know how things go. Very bright young man.
Of course.
All right.
Thank you so much for
You're very welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Very welcome. It's about 3:20, everyone. Just nice to be able to catch up with him and just see, the minds of young people who are coming out of school these days. The things, the concepts that they have that we haven't even thought of before. It's really interesting to be able to see things from their perspective. All right, let's take a quick break. And I believe we're going to get a sighting of our chief meteorologist, who's going to give us some information about this changing weather outside when we come back. All right, everyone, giving you a live pic of Marine One there, sitting on the tarmac. Now, we're not certain if this is in Michigan or back home on the East Coast in D.C., in that area. Usually they land right outside of D.C., but the president has been on the move today. He's been to several different places. At the beginning of our broadcast, even, we took some comments from him as he was speaking to the Detroit Economic Club, talking a little bit about where he sees things standing in the country right now in terms of the economy. He said that right now he feels like we have pretty much defeated inflation, that it's almost to a zero. And he talked about increasing incomes, that America is respected like never before. Let's go ahead and show you, though, what the stock market is doing today based off of his comments today, but then also over the last several days. Of course, there is this big conversation that's happening right now about what happens with the independence of the Federal Reserve. And that seems to be having a great deal of impact on the stock market. Yesterday and today, as we're seeing. Yesterday, we started the day in the green and quickly took a dive into the red. And today now you're seeing the entire day has been in the red. The S&P 500 falling today. The Dow Jones here that shed 398 points here, ending the day. And the NASDAQ composite also fell 0.1% today. And there are several different things that I'm seeing being pointed out again, going back into the conversation surrounding the Fed chair here and how that could even impact the meeting that the Federal Reserve will have, the Board of Governors will have later on this month to decide where we go with interest rates moving forward. What will they do? Will they continue to cut, or will they keep things where they are? What type of influence will all of the things that are happening right now with the DOJ now formally putting the Fed chair and the office under investigation? Yesterday we had the CPI data, or earlier today, actually, we had the CPI data that also came out. Yesterday we had the December jobs report that finally came out. And so a part of this is also coming from that. They both encompassed an outlook of weaker yet stable labor market. That's what I'm seeing from the experts who are analyzing this. They said that likely encouraging the Fed to hold off on interest rate cuts at their first meeting of the year. Again, like I was saying, that will be later on this month. So plenty of things that are kind of being said and done that are all having an effect on what we're seeing here. Also, I'm seeing that oil prices today jumped, and that was coming when we talk about things that are happening as a result of comments, but then also actions. Oil prices jumping as a result of President Trump canceling all meetings with Iran. Of course, it's a top OPEC producer. He told protesters who were out in the streets there in Iran, help is on its way. That was the president's comment for the people of Iran. And right around 3:45, we're actually going to be having a conversation with a UFC professor about what's happening at Iran and, that impact that it's having on Iranian Americans here and how we should all be viewing what we're seeing abroad. It is 3:28. Like I said, lots going on. Wanted to give you a picture of a couple of things that we've been monitoring again there as the stock market closed the day in the red. But let's take a quick break. We're going to take 2 minutes and we'll be back with our next conversation. Okay, 3:30 right now. Thank you so much for continuing to stay with us here. Our last 30 minutes, we have some really important conversations, so don't go anywhere. The American Cancer Society, for instance, has just released a huge report here analyzing new data here to improve public health. One of the maybe findings that stands out the most here, for the first time, the 5-year relative survival rate for all cancers combined has reached 70% for people diagnosed during 2015 to 2021 in the United States. That's amazing. I want to bring in Dr. Kevin King, who is a radiation oncologist, to speak a little bit more about these new findings. Thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure being here.
So, when people hear that they have been diagnosed with cancer, it is very difficult for you to keep your mind on the positive and not think this is a death sentence. Hearing something like this really is encouraging.
Definitely. Having an overall survival improvement that's almost doubling the numbers that we had back in the 90s, this is a historic milestone, and it reflects decades of progress finally paying off. But it's also something that didn't happen overnight. So what we're seeing is that now 4.8 million cancer deaths have been averted nationwide due to less smoking, earlier detection, and treatment breakthroughs that like immunotherapy or targeted therapies. And I know everyone's excited about the Bears game coming up this weekend, so I like to put things into terms that everyone understands. That's like packing Soldier Field almost 80 times, having every seat filled, or even the entire population of Chicago, plus most of Cook County, that is now saved due to the breakthroughs that we've seen over the past, few decades.
Wow, that definitely puts it in perspective. Thank you. And we haven't thought about that when we've talked a lot about the Bears this week. That's a whole new story there. So, you mentioned less smoking, but one of the findings was that lung cancer will cause the most cancer deaths in 2026. How?
Yeah, so unfortunately, lung cancer is still the most aggressive cancer that we're treating out there, causing the most lung cancer overall cancer deaths each year. That's going to be more than both colorectal, which is the second leading cancer death, and pancreatic cancer combined.
Wow.
We've seen a huge advancement, though. I don't want it to sound all doom and gloom, because we are seeing fewer smokers coming through, we're able to increase that 5-year overall survival that was previously only about 20%, all the way up to about 40% for more advanced disease. But there's still a gap here, unfortunately. We are seeing that a lot of these people who would qualify for screening tests of a low-dose CT scan are not getting it. In Illinois, fewer than 1 in 5 eligible people are up to date with their lung cancer screening.
Wow. And screenings play such a huge part of our knowledge base, not just for lungs, but, for mammograms, for colonoscopies, and so many other things. Screenings kind of cover quite a bit, and staying on top of them is tantamount to literally life or death.
Exactly. And, just because we've had a lot of breakthroughs in our medicine, it still doesn't beat the ability for early detection. If we're able to catch these cancers early, that's really our strongest weapon to really cure these cancers.
Yeah. What are maybe a couple of other findings from the report that really stuck out to you?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we're not really talking about is that cancer in general, because we're seeing so many people live longer and this 5-year survival of over 70%, that's amazing. Cancer is starting to increasingly become more of a chronic illness instead of a short-term crisis. So we as a society need to do better at building our survivorship for these cancer survivors, because they're still faced with a lot of issues like fatigue or cognitive changes or lung and heart disease, or even the possibility of developing a second cancer, unfortunately. So I think one of these things that's kind of an undertone to the whole report is just an overall improvement of our survivorship ability over the next few years.
And what are some of the things that we need to be doing where that's concerned?
Well, when it comes down to it, I think that the big things are, one, staying on top of screening. So just because you've had one cancer, you might be at increased risk for developing a second cancer. So like you mentioned before, colonoscopy starting at age 45, mammograms starting at age 40, prostate screening, it's going to be about 45 to 50 for the general population, or at age 40 if you're an African American. So these are things that people need to start talking about with their family members and definitely with their providers so they can stay on top of it.
Yeah, and do you think, what are the other things that contribute to what we're seeing here in terms of survivorship? Is it more education, more awareness out there? Is it better technology? What are some of the other things that you would say contribute to what we're seeing?
Yeah, it's all the above, to be honest. It's definitely improvements in our screening abilities. So, just recently, the FDA approved at-home cervical cancer screenings, whereas before it was a very uncomfortable exam to go into your gynae and get a pap smear. You can do that all at home. And we're seeing a lot of that move both to a home setting and really leading to earlier detection in a lot of diseases.
If you look at it from the flip side, there are some times when the conversation shifts for various health issues that, okay, when people find out it might not take me out, that then they become less apt to act.
I'll be honest with you, I don't see that too much. Because still, even though we're getting 7 out of 10 people are going to be living at least 5 years with their cancer, cancer is still a really scary word. And when you hear that big C word and you sit down in your doctor's office and you talk it through, most people are pretty apt to get started on treatment and get the treatment that they need, just because the idea of cancer is so scary and it affects so many people, both within Chicago and nationwide.
And how concerned are you about, we're having a lot of conversations right now about health insurance, premiums for people skyrocketing. Cancer treatment, cancer medications, they are not cheap. So how concerned are you where that conversation is concerned?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a scary time for sure. I do want to reassure everyone who's listening that we will always find a way to provide the treatment that is necessary. There are grants out there. There are different outlets, different routes to make sure that people will be able to get the treatment that they need and the treatment that they deserve.
Well, I really appreciate being able to hear that. What are some other takeaways you think people should get from what we're seeing in this report?
Yeah, I still think that, I said it before, but I'll say it again. Prevention plus early detection is still our strongest weapon when it comes to fighting cancer. So quitting smoking, because we know that smoking is associated with lung cancer, bladder cancer, cervical cancer, staying up to date on the recommended screenings, maintaining a healthy weight, and limiting alcohol. These are all great ways to prevent cancer. Unfortunately, though, even if you do all these things, cancer doesn't really discriminate. So really making sure that you stay on top of those screenings is the best way to make sure we can catch a cancer early.
When you say cancer doesn't discriminate, can we talk a little bit before we get out of here about demographics, whether it's age, race, gender? What are some of the things that we're seeing there that we should know? Some shifts that we're seeing from one year to the next when it relates to those things.
Yeah, so what's exciting is that Illinois follows the national trend of declining cancer mortality, especially for lung, breast, prostate, and colorectal cancer. But if you look at the Chicago neighborhoods themselves, they show a pretty wide variation. We're seeing much lower screening rates and later stage diagnoses on both the west and the south sides. And this leads to higher mortality despite a similar incidence or a similar detection of these cancers. Which really is what this means, is that it's just a classic problem to access to care and access to screening. Your zip code should not determine your treatment outcome. So we need to improve our screening gaps across the city.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. King. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. You take care. It's 3:40 right now. It is incredible to hear about survival rates going up, but that last portion of our conversation is so crucial to what we see here in the city, whether it's a lack of access, lack of education, lack of awareness that happens. It is still cancer is still something that we all have to take so seriously. Men, women, young people, older people, we all need to take very seriously. But there are ways of us doing a better job of, one, preventing, and two, mitigating. So let's go ahead. We're going to take our final break here before another conversation, and we're going to close things out with a really important topic that I mentioned just a short while ago when we were looking at how the numbers closed today for the stock market, and that is what is going on in Iran. 2 minutes and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everyone, as I give you a live picture to Air Force One there. We are maybe moments away from seeing President Trump come off of the plane. Not sure, of course, the timeline here as we look, but again, he has been on the move today, going to several different places. One, to kind of tout the economy. Look, it's 2026. The midterm elections are just months away, and this is a really big topic. The economy, what is happening, how people feel about it versus what types of stats they're releasing about it. Those can be quite different. You can say that things are going really well, that it's the best it's ever been, but how people feel when they go to the grocery store, how people feel when they're paying their taxes and things of that nature, that can be very different. So he's kind of been out and about today, moving to different places, economic clubs, a tour of a Ford facility to talk about manufacturing, and a few other places. As he's been on the move, of course, there have been many who have been following right along, reporters who have been there and everything today. So we've been watching. We looked at Marine One, now we're looking at Air Force One. We've seen him. We took his comments when he was in Detroit. Also saw earlier in the day when he was going through the Ford manufacturing plant here. One of the things that President Trump has said, has done, let me say that, is that he ended all meetings with Iranian officials that were supposed to be about oil. Now, that is a biggie because they are the top OPEC producer. Well, I was just looking over our trending queries for today, and it's a list that we get every morning of different things that people are kind of looking for online. And one of them is, what's happening in Iran? Let's talk about it. We have Pegah, Pagov, and Bani Hashmi. And if I mispronounce that, please correct me here. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, we're on mute right now. I definitely want to hear how your name is pronounced and how I'm supposed to say it.
Sorry. Hi again. Thank you for having me. My name is Pega Bani Hashemi.
So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. You are a fourth-year doctoral student at U Chicago Law. You work in journalism and specifically about international law and constitutional law in the Middle East. So your voice is needed for this conversation. You're a native of Iran. When people ask what's going on in Iran, what's your response?
If I want to be very honest with you, when they ask me, which is many people ask me today and yesterday and during last few days, it's very hard for me to not cry for the first steps, because whatever we are seeing is a catastrophe. It's really devastating us, and it's kind of very difficult for us to see what's going on inside of the Iran. In fact, last 2 weeks, some protests happened from Tehran, Bazar Bozorg in Tehran, Grand Bazaar in Tehran, and then the protest went to other cities and then come back to the big cities like Tehran, Shiraz, Mashhad, and then we saw thousands of the people went outside and tried to basically bring their voice to the regime, that talk about the economic problem, political pressure, and variety of the human rights that basically regime took from them. They try to bring these matters to the regime.
You touched on it just a bit at the end of your statement there, but what are the issues that get people to the level of saying, I want my voice heard, or I'm willing to risk death?
It's very big matters to cover it in a very short conversation in a TV interview, of course. But I can tell you what is going on is actually we have a regime that last 47 years after revolution, Islamic revolution that has happened 1979. Basically, we have a regime that more and more doesn't let the people to talk about their rights, talk about the freedom of speech, talk about the the many variety of the citizen rights. This is the problem. But beside of everything, actually, unfortunately, due to many sanctions that has happened to economy of the Iran, plus the lots of corruption that we have inside the regime of the Iran, people getting more and more poorer and poorer. This is how basically put the people in a very pressure to what's going on. This we wanted to basically put the monarchy away and bring a Republican regime and plus the Islamic regime to basically bring equality, bring lots of rights to us. And now we are going to lose lots of that. And beside of everything, we have a crisis about the human rights in Iran. If you just look at, for example, the number of the execution, it's massive execution happen every single years, and the human rights organization always cover that. And let me just get to the very right point, to the very present point. Do you know, just a few hours ago, just by the very early morning of the time in US time, is some news has basically released something that is bringing lots of shocks to us. During just last 3 days, the regime of Iran killed 12,000 civil citizens in Iran. Just the protesters that came to the street, and they are not even armed, because we don't have a legal arm rights in Iran. And can you believe it? The 12,000 people just killed by the regime during the last 2-3 days. This is really shocking. This is how, when I heard for a few hours, I was overwhelmed, I was restless, and I couldn't even believe that what I'm seeing. And plus, again, maybe you heard about this last 4 or 5 days, regime of Iran shut down the whole internet inside the country and shut down the whole phones, home phones, mobile phones, landline, everything. This is the 6 days we are starting to have the 6 days that we don't know what's going on exactly inside the Iran. And whatever we are seeing, whatever we can have some news from the Iran, is just come from the people who has the Starlink inside the Iran, and they can release some information for us. So we're really scared at this stage to when the internet come back, what we gonna go to see that? What's gonna be happen at that time then?
Yeah, and that kind of touches on what I wanted to ask you next, and that is whether you can even trust the data that's coming out of Iran right now, whether it be the death toll. I mean, do we think it's underestimated or overestimated? Can we trust the data that's coming out of Iran?
I mean, the first media, when they release it, basically they said that it's kind of just the estimate, because it's not official numbers, of course. It's something that media and some human rights organization perhaps could do the fact checking and release it. But today, it's other basically medias came out and said 12,000 is not the accurate number. We have like a 15,000 or maybe even more. But let me tell you something. It's really, really sad for me, and it's very difficult for me to not cry from your camera, actually, because whatever we are saying is the bodies just killed and in a dead body full of the blood line over some buildings. This is how we are seeing. This is how the videos release, actually, and it's unbelievable. I mean, you know, I don't think we never had 12,000 killed in Iran history, even when we have a war between the Iran and Iraq for 8 years. I don't think if during the 2-3 days we have like this much of the numerous killed body in front of our eyes.
What do you think about the American influence on what's happening there and President Trump's promises to the people there?
Actually, that is something that I think inside Iran, people are hearing these things, and I'm sure it's bring them some courage, bring them some hope. And honestly with you, I think President Trump is very popular inside the Iran. Even when he was elected, I think inside Iran, people were very exciting about this news. However, we have some other people that they don't think like this idea. But anyway, I think this is how they really wanted to have some helps, because for years and years, many people believe that we shouldn't ask any foreign countries to help us. But now I think more and more people getting bigger population, that they are thinking maybe we need some help from the foreign country like United States.
Yeah, I mean, some of the leaders there commented specifically that they thought people were acting out to please President Trump by protesting. Let me ask you just about your background. How long have you been in the United States? What was your journey like?
Of course, as an immigrant, immigration never have been easy. I don't think when the people talking or asking about immigration, I'm always saying, even if you coming with lots of privilege, still to be an immigrant is not easy. I'm proudly living in United States, and I'm proud to be citizen right now. But I think to come from other countries, specifically the countries like Iran, that you have a rich culture behind of you, but you also put your families and everybody's and all your belongings behind of you, and leave them and coming for the new life. It's emotionally always have been very difficult for everybody, included me. I actually lived in London more than a decade. So when I left Iran, I moved to London. I lived in United Kingdom, as I mentioned, and over a decade, and then I came to United States. I love to be in Chicago. I love Chicago, and I'm very proudly studying in the University of Chicago, and I'm very strong fan of the University of Chicago, specifically law school. I read a sentence in social media regarding the situation that it's somebody said basically we are living here physically, but our hearts and our minds are living in Iran. So that's very true actually, because we are safe here. We know nothing happening here, but when we see what's going on inside Iran, it's very painful for us, and that's more painful when I can see, for example, I cannot help the people inside the country more than this. I'm trying to writing a lots of article. I'm trying to bring a lots of academic article, academic talk, but still I think I wish I could do something even more.
I'm sure it's so hard for you, but thank you for using your voice today. I appreciate it, and I'm sorry for what you're watching your people go through in Iran.
Thank you so much for covering this news, and it was very nice to see you.
Absolutely. Take care. Everyone, it's 3:56 right now. We're going to take one last break, and we'll be right back to close things out. Welcome back, everybody. The one thing we weren't able to get to in our time was Chief Meteorologist Emily Walls to tell us about the cold air on the way. But just stay right where you are. First at 4 is coming up next. We will see you back here for Chicago Live from 1 to 4 p.m. again tomorrow.
From Chicago, this is Fox 32 News at 4.
Right now at 4, overall crime is dropping in Chicago, but one sector is on the rise.
A lot of businesses use this platform every day.